You ever come home after a long day, just wanting to relax, only to find your own driveway completely blocked off by balloons, tables, and a bunch of strangers acting like it's their property? That's exactly what happened to me. I pull up to my house, and there's this massive party spilling onto my front lawn. Cars double parked, music blasting, and the centerpiece of it all, a woman I'd never seen before, standing there like she owns the whole street. I asked politely, "Hey, can you move your car? I live here." And that's when things took a turn. She turns around, wine glass in hand, and gives me that look. You know, the one full of entitlement. "You can park somewhere else," she says, waving me off like I'm just some delivery guy. She tells me it's her daughter's graduation. The HOA approved it, and if I have a problem, I can take it up with the board. That's when I realized I was dealing with a full-blown HOA Karen. But what she didn't realize is, I'm not just any neighbor. I'm the local fire marshal, blocking access to a residential driveway, especially with tables, grills, and crowd overflow isn't just rude. It's a safety violation. Actually, it's a crime. But I didn't tell her that right away. I wanted to see just how far she'd push things. And oh, she didn't disappoint. From threatening to call the HOA president on me to accusing me of trespassing on my own property, Karen was on a roll. But what she didn't know is, by the time she finished her second drink, I'd already made a few calls of my own. Let's just say, when the fire department rolls up, sirens and all, the party doesn't stay so cheerful. But you'll want to stick around for how that moment actually played out. Now, here's the part that still blows my mind. As I'm standing there trying to keep my cool, I notice more and more people showing up. It's walking right past me like I'm invisible. Folding chairs were being dragged across my lawn. Someone even set up a bounce house that was halfway blocking the sidewalk. It was clear this wasn't just some casual get-together, which is a full-blown block party, and they had absolutely no intention of including or even informing me, their actual neighbor. And Karen? She was now acting like the queen of the street, giving orders to teens, laughing loud, and completely ignoring the fact that she had hijacked someone else's property. I tried to talk to a guy who looked like he might be in charge of the setup. He shrugged and said, "She told us it was fine." That's when I knew Karen had planned this whole thing without talking to anyone who mattered, including the HOA board she kept name-dropping. I know most of the folks on it, none of them approved a party like this. No permits, no notifications, and worst of all, no access for emergency vehicles. If something went wrong, if a kid fell, if a grill caught fire, there'd be no way for help to reach the scene quickly. And believe me, I've seen how fast things can turn. Meanwhile, I stepped into my own yard and noticed trash already blowing into my garden. People were using my hose, my outlet, even leaning drinks on my car. At this point, I wasn't just annoyed, I was genuinely concerned. Karen clearly had no idea what she'd set in motion. But instead of reacting with anger, I stayed calm and started documenting everything. Because when you're a fire marshal, you know exactly which strings to pull. And I was just getting started. I never thought a random Saturday morning would turn into something straight out of a drama series. It started off simple, me heading out to check on our side yard after noticing a strange noise near the fence. That's when I caught our HOA's most notorious busybody, let's call her Karen's, snooping around inside our property like she owned the place. Not on the sidewalk, not at the gate inside. At first, I honestly thought she was lost or looking for a cat or something, but nope. She was poking around, clipboard in hand, snapping pictures like she was on some kind of secret mission. I calmly asked what she was doing, and that's when the tone changed. She immediately got defensive, claiming I was threatening her just because I asked a question on my own property. Next thing I know, she's dialing 911 in a panic, saying there's a hostile man and she fears for her safety. Meanwhile, I'm just standing there in disbelief, hands by my sides, wondering how this flipped so fast. Now, here's the twist she didn't see coming. My wife is a 911 dispatcher. And guess who picked up the call? Yep, she recognized Karen's voice instantly from prior complaints and HOA drama and kept her calm, gathering the facts. But what Karen didn't know was that this time, she wasn't in control of the narrative. What happened next took everything up a notch, and let's just say, when the police showed up, things didn't go how Karen expected. But before I get into that, let me show you exactly what led up to the call and the footage I caught that changed everything. Because when someone like Karen gets too confident and doesn't realize who's really on the other end of the line, it makes for one unforgettable showdown. So let me back up a little and explain how we even got to this point. We moved into this neighborhood about 2 years ago, hoping for peace, a sense of community, and just some normal suburban living. What we didn't expect was an HOA board that acted more like a neighborhood patrol, with Karen leading the charge. She's the kind of person who writes up violations if your trash bins are out 5 minutes late, or if your grass looks too wild after a light rain. Always watching, always with that same fake smile and a camera phone in hand. At first, we tried to be friendly early. We did. We went to HOA meetings, waved when we passed her, even invited her to a block BBQ once. But the more we tried to play nice, the more she zeroed in on us. It started with harmless notes about our front lights being too bright. Then she claimed our mailbox was off regulation. When that didn't rattle us, she moved on to accusing us of having an unapproved garden box, something half the block has. And now, this. Actually trespassing just to find something to report. What made it worse was that this wasn't the first time someone had mentioned her being on other people's property without permission. But no one ever had proof till now. I had recently installed a couple of discrete cameras around the house after a few plants went missing from our side yard. I didn't think I'd catch a neighbor, especially not her. The footage from that morning showed everything, her slipping through the side gate without knocking, looking around like she was on an investigation. And when she saw me watching from the back porch, she froze for a second, then pulled out her phone. I couldn't believe it, but I knew the moment she hit dial. This was going to be bigger than just a neighborly dispute. As Karen stood there on the phone, pacing in my yard like she owned it, I couldn't help but wonder what exactly she was trying to gain. Was she hoping to get me in trouble? Intimidate us into silence? Maybe she thought calling 911 would scare me into backing down. But what she didn't realize was that this time, her plan was unraveling fast in real time. Could see it all play out right in front of me, but I stayed calm. I didn't yell. I didn't move toward her. I just stood there with my phone recording, knowing my wife was on the other end of her call, hearing every word. My wife later told me Karen had tried to twist the story, claiming I'd cornered her and wouldn't let her leave. But the footage said otherwise. Karen was moving freely, waving her hands, walking back and forth, even taking more pictures while waiting for the cops. And when my wife asked her basic questions, like why she was on private property, Karen danced around them, saying she had HOA business to handle. But even in HOA rules, there's no clause that gives someone the right to walk into someone's fenced yard without permission. Meanwhile, word started spreading around the neighborhood. A couple of neighbors peeked out from their windows, curious about the flashing lights and raised voices. One of them, Dave, who lives across the street, had his own history with Karen. He'd once been fined for having a holiday decoration out past the approved removal date. He came over quietly and whispered that this didn't surprise him one bit. He even mentioned he'd seen Karen snooping near his driveway a few nights back. That's when it hit me, maybe this wasn't just about us. Maybe Karen's been crossing the line with more people than anyone realized. And now, with actual proof and a 911 call on record, things were finally starting to crack. But the real storm hadn't hit yet. That was still coming. The sound of sirens in the distance grew louder, and I could see Karen straighten up like she was preparing for a performance. She took a few steps back from the gate, trying to make it look like she hadn't just been trespassing. But I already had the footage, and my wife was still quietly listening in on the call, staying professional while mentally connecting all the dots. Karen had no idea the dispatcher she was feeding this story to was married to the suspect. She was accusing as the police car pulled up. Karen waved them down with an over-the-top urgency, pointing toward me as if I was some kind of threat. The officers calmly approached, asking both of us to step aside and explain what happened. I stayed polite, handed over my phone, and let them watch the clip her walking through the gate, taking photos, then calling 911 as if she'd been attacked. One officer raised his eyebrows slightly while watching, clearly picking up that something didn't add up. Karen, though, kept pushing. She told them she had received complaints from other homeowners about our yard, that she was doing her duty to protect neighborhood standards. But when asked to name the complaints or show documents that gave her permission to enter private property, she suddenly got vague. She repeated phrases like HOA guidelines and verbal authorizations, but nothing concrete. Her voice started to waver a bit, like she realized her story wasn't as solid as she thought. At the same time, my wife texted me from the dispatch office. They're flagging this call for review. Officers know the whole background now. That was the moment I knew things were about to shift. But in that moment, right before anything was decided, tension hung in the air like a wire ready to snap. Neighbors were now gathering, whispering, watching. Karen's mask of confidence was cracking, but she was still standing her ground for now. Just when I thought things couldn't get more surreal, one of the officers got a call on his radio and stepped aside. A minute later, he walked back over, this time looking straight at Karen with a much more serious tone. "Ma'am," he said, "dispatch just confirmed you've made multiple calls like this before involving different neighbors, always with similar accusations." Karen's face stiffened. She tried to play it off, saying she was just being vigilant and that the neighborhood had gone downhill lately. But the officer didn't look convinced. Then came the twist none of us saw coming. Another neighbor. Mrs. Ramirez came forward from the growing crowd. She said loudly, "I have cameras too. Last week, this woman was in my backyard while I was at work." She said she was checking for fence violations. A few others started murmuring, some nodding. Turns out, Karen's been doing this for months, sneaking onto private property, making phone calls, and claiming she's acting on behalf of the HOA, even though no official paperwork ever backs her up. And that's when the police officer made a call of his own, this time to the HOA president. We all stood there in silence, listening to Karen fidget and pace, trying to look like this was all a misunderstanding. But as soon as the HOA president answered, the officer put the call on speaker. The voice on the other end was clear. "She's not authorized to do inspections. That's not her role. We've already warned her about this behavior." You could feel the shift instantly. Karen's authority, her go-to weapon in the neighborhood, was slipping right through her fingers. But even then, she didn't back down. Instead, she doubled down, claiming she was being set up and targeted. The scene was spiraling, and no one quite knew what would happen next. All I knew was, this was no longer just about a phone call or a fence. It was about finally pulling back the curtain on someone who thought the rules didn't apply to her.